They thought she had nothing left to ask for. A prisoner sentenced to die, hours away from her execution, walking with chains around her wrists and a silence heavier than the walls around her. But when the guards asked for her final request, she didn't ask for food, a last phone call, or a message for her family. Instead, she whispered one sentence that made every man in that room freeze. "I want to see the Virgin Mary, just once." None of them expected what would happen next. And none of them, until this day, can explain it. The day began like any other inside the iron gates of St. Ridge Penitentiary. The air was cold, filled with the smell of dust, concrete, and regret. Maya Alvarez, a 28-year-old woman with a long black braid and tired eyes, sat silently on her bunk, staring at the faint sunlight sneaking through the bars. She had once been known for her fiery laugh, her stubborn heart, her belief that she could survive anything. But months on death row had drained her voice until only a quiet stillness remained. Sancha, the guards walked in that morning slower than usual. Even they, hardened men who had seen more tragedy than they wished to remember, felt a strange weight in the air. Officer Ruiz, the oldest among them, avoided her eyes at first. He'd known Maya's case better than anyone. How she had killed a man who had tried to end her sister's life. The law saw murder. Ruiz saw something more complicated, something painful, something human. "Tada, Maya," he said finally, his voice unsteady. "It's time." Tada, she nodded, no tears, no trembling, just a long, slow breath. Tada, they bound her hands gently, almost respectfully, as if they were tying the wrists of a fallen soldier rather than a condemned woman. She walked between them without hesitation, her steps soft, almost graceful. Maya had always been strong, but today she wasn't fighting anything, not the injustice, not the fear, not even fate. Sanja, when they reached the small transfer room outside the execution chamber, the warden stepped forward. He was a tall, broad man whose face had been carved by years of tough decisions. "Before we begin the procedures," he said, "you're allowed one final request." Jetta, the room fell silent. Jetta, Maya lifted her head for the first time that day. Her dark eyes met theirs, and for a moment, every man in that room felt something shift, like they were looking at someone standing between this world and the next. "Jetta, I want," she said softly, "to see the Virgin Mary." Jetta, the officers exchanged confused glances. The chapel was usually closed at this hour. No one had ever asked for something like this, but something about Maya's voice, fragile yet full of purpose, made the warden hesitate. He finally gave a slow nod. "Taja, take her," he ordered. Tata, the chapel was dim and quiet, the scent of old wood and incense lingering in the air. The statue of the Virgin Mary stood at the front, tall, gentle hands folded in eternal prayer. Maya walked toward it with trembling steps, like someone approaching a long-lost mother. Tata, as soon as she reached the front pew, she fell to her knees. Tears streamed down her face for the first time in months. Heavy, unstoppable, cleansing tears. "Tata, mother," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't come here to ask for a miracle. I know what I've done. I know the law. But please, let them know I wasn't a monster." Tata, behind her, every guard who had escorted her stood silently, watching a woman they thought they knew reveal a part of herself they had never imagined. Even Ruiz felt his throat tighten. Tata, then something strange happened. Tata, the chapel lights flickered. A soft, warm glow filled the room. Faint at first, then brighter, like sunlight forming in the center of a storm. The officers looked at each other, unsure if they were dreaming or losing their minds. Satan, Maya lifted her head and gasped. Cha-cha-cha-cha-cha, the glow intensified, bathing the entire chapel in a pale golden light. It didn't come from the windows or the electric lamps. It came from the statue itself, as if the stone figure had awakened from its eternal stillness. Santa, the officers took a step back instinctively. Ruz raised a hand to shield his eyes. But Maya smiled through her tears. Sadza, the statue's face, once cold and expressionless, seemed to soften. Its eyes, once blank stone, now held a depth that none of the men could describe. It wasn't moving. It wasn't blinking. But there was life in it, a presence that made the air hum with something beyond human understanding. Tete Maya's chains rattled as she rose slowly to her feet. She brought her hands together in front of her chest, bowing in a way that felt ancient, sacred. Tete, thank you, she whispered, as if she were speaking to the warm glow itself. Cesar Ruiz felt his heart pounding, his breath unsteady. He had seen death, crime, grief, and cruelty. But this was something else entirely. Something he knew no prison report would ever capture. Cha-cha, Maya, he murmured. Are you seeing something? Cha-cha, she turned her head slightly in his direction, her eyes shimmering. I'm seeing forgiveness, she said, and not for me alone. Cha-cha, before he could respond, the glow dimmed, slowly, gently, like a candle being lowered but not extinguished. The chapel returned to its calm, quiet state. The statue stood still once again, just carved stone under ordinary light. Cha-cha, but the room felt different. Warmer, lighter, as if the walls themselves remembered what they had witnessed. Tete and Maya's face had changed too. No fear, no sorrow, just peace, a kind of peace that made the officers shift uncomfortably, unsure why they felt like the ones being judged now, not her. Cha-cha, the warden, entered moments later, unaware of what had occurred. It's time, he said. Cha-cha, but Ruiz stepped forward. Something in him broke open, something he couldn't put back together. Sir, with all due respect, maybe we should re-examine her case. Cha-cha, the other guards nodded, their voices trembling in unison. She deserves it, one whispered. We all saw. Cha-cha, the warden stared at their shaken faces. These were not men prone to fantasy or panic. Yet their eyes held truth, raw, unsettling truth. Cha-cha, what exactly did you see? He asked. Tada, no one had an answer. Not a rational one. Cha-cha, but Maya smiled faintly. Not what I wanted, she said. What we all needed. Cha-cha, her words hung in the air, heavier than chains. Cha-cha, the warden exhaled slowly. Stay the execution, he ordered quietly. Cha-cha, and with that single decision, the world shifted. Not because a miracle had occurred, but because for the first time in a very long time, hardened men found the courage to believe in something more than rules and orders. They believed in humanity. Chanjanja knew Cha-cha and Maya's life didn't end that day. Her request, her faith, and the unexplainable moment inside that abandoned chapel forced the court to reopen her case. She was eventually granted a full retrial, and the truth that had been buried under fear and confusion was finally revealed. Ta-da! But more important than her freedom was the message she left behind. Ta-ta, forgiveness isn't always about erasing the past. Sometimes it's about giving the future a chance to begin again. Ta-ta, and sometimes all it takes is one moment, one glowing, impossible moment, to remind the world that mercy is still alive. Ta-ta.